to welcome you to the first episode of Noreen's Kitchen Table Talks. Tonight our guest is Shelly Blimke. She is a certified master food preserver. She's going to be joining us tonight. We're going to be talking all things canning basics, safety, and best practices, and some of the nightmare things that we see going on in the interwebs and here on YouTube and on Facebook and wherever we happen to see them on the internet. Because just because you see it on the internet doesn't mean that it's right, good, or safe. So we want to make sure that canning season is getting rolling with gardens and harvests and fruit and all kinds of yummy vegetables, and we want to make sure everybody's doing the best thing that they can to make sure that their family has great home canned goodness. I'm also joined by my friend Heather of the Needy Homesteader channel. Heather, say hey. And I'm also joined by my friend Liza of the Hacienda Homestead. And I think Liza has one video right now, but she is getting the ball rolling on her new channel very soon, and I know that you're going to love to see it. She's going to be doing some Caribbean and Cuban flair dishes and some lifestyle videos, and I think that you're really going to enjoy what she's going to be having to offer. But without further ado, I'm going to yield the floor to our guest, Shelly, and she's going to tell you a little bit about herself, and then we're going to give her some questions. So we're going to take questions in the chat. So, Shelly, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for approaching me. I have never been asked to do this. I teach classes here in Vancouver, Washington. I've been a master food preserver for about 6 years. I started canning with my mom, canning jam and fruit, and she did a little bit of pressure canning, not much. But when I got married and had kids of my own, I decided it was time to do the right thing and can, and I had canned for a lot of years, and the extension service in my area had a canning, kind of a canning clinic for a few weeks, and I took it, and I learned that I had been doing some things incorrectly that my mom had taught me how to do, because that's what we do. So after the classes were over, they mentioned, hey, we have this master food preserver program, and if you're interested, this is what you need to do. And so I completed it, and that's what I do now, is I help other people learn how to can, and we just community outreach. We're always looking for more master food preservers, and that's what we do, is teach people how to can safely.
I think that is awesome. And for all of you who have joined us, welcome. I apologize again for the technical difficulty, but in the information box below the watch screen, you will find all of the pertinent information. I've included a link to Shelly's Facebook group. It is a private group, but it is the WSU Home Food Preservers Facebook page. I have been part of what Shelly does for over a year now, maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years. I don't know. But it really is a great place for to kind of field questions. If you have questions, maybe you're not sure of something, the ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of guys that are in that group. There's a lot of men who do canning. It kind of, I don't know why it's a surprise to me. It isn't anymore, but there are some men who are doing some really awesome stuff. And they will help you answer your questions. Shelly will help you answer your questions. I will say, on more than one occasion, I have private messaged Shelly, who has been kind enough to answer my questions on certain things, just because, you know, sometimes you think you know, but if you just want that little bit of clarity, that Facebook page is a really great place. So if you go over there, and you can hit the, you know, ask, you know, to join the group, and then Shelly will approve you to belong, and then it's a lot of fun, because then everybody kind of puts their pictures in there and of what they've been canning, and we can all learn from each other that way. It's really a nice community. So you'll find that link in the information box, along with links to Heather and Liza's YouTube channel and all of the other information that you might need. And if there's any other information that comes up during this broadcast, I'll be sure to put it in there afterward, so you could come back when the replay happens, and all of that stuff will be there. So I guess I just want to start by, I guess we'll just start by asking you, Shelly, if there's anything that you see going on right now that you feel is like really concerning to you as far as what's out there on the internet and what people might think is safe but really isn't?
I think one of the things that concerns me the most, and as a master food preserver, our group the most, is when people find a recipe and they change it to what they think they want by adding things like onions and garlic and things that are low acid foods, and it changes exactly what the recipe is, which is dangerous. The recipes are made to be the way they're made. The processes have been done, the testing has been done. So my thing is finding recipes to use and sticking with the recipe and not sort of doing it your way. Because if you do it your way, it may not be safe.
I am guilty of that. I have videos on my channel of Rick's spaghetti sauce and our chili, it's Rick's chili, and we do can those. And I'm still gonna can them, but I have always put disclaimers on my videos. You need to know what you're doing before you even attempt to do anything like that. I always tell people now, because I get lots and lots of people ask me every single day. I get this question at least once a day, sometimes twice, maybe more, on different videos. I have almost 1,700 videos on my YouTube channel. Most of them are recipe videos. And I get the question all the time, can I can that? Everything from the strawberry ice cream topping, which is made with cornstarch, to the biscuits and gravy recipe for the sausage gravy, to cheese sauce, to cheese soup, anything that, you know, that they think, oh, that'd be great to have on my shelf. And there's a great misnomer to people, for people who may not have experienced canning, because they see the products on the grocery store shelf. They see cans of macaroni and cheese on the shelf. They see cans of ravioli and spaghetti and meatballs. They see cans of just about everything on the grocery store shelf. And they say, if they can do it and put it on the grocery store shelf, then why can't I do it and put it on my pantry shelf? Shelley, you want to address that and explain why you can't do those things at home?
Well, the problem is this. We only have what we have at home. We have a pressure canner. And when you go to the store and you buy a can of, let's say, chili with beans in it, or beef stew, or something that's a low acid kind of food, those foods have gone through, they have a process. They have, they don't even have, they have recipes, but they're more of a, how do I say this? They're more of a, there's a process. And they have different equipment. Everything that you see on the store shelf has different equipment. They have a retort canner. We can't do that at home. We can only do what we can do safely in a pressure canner, but it would be great if we could do that. We can't, because they have processes. They have all kinds of rules they have to follow. And there has to be, it has to be exactly the same every single time. And they can do it exactly the same every time because they have that process in place. We can't do that.
Right.
Does that make sense?
I think it does. Yes.
Not to mention it's loaded with preservatives that make it be able to live in a can.
Yeah.
So, you know, we don't add a lot of that stuff when we're home cooking. You know, we don't sit there and add all those extra. That's why we cook from scratch, so we don't have to add all that gunk to our food. So the gunk that you find on the shelf isn't something that you should aspire to do. You should, you know, aspire to do, you know, the safe, go the safe route, you know. I get that a lot too about canning ravioli and noodles, chicken noodle soup with the noodles in it.
Big no.
Yeah.
No. Well, here's the
I even stay away from the onions and the garlic because I'm sure Shelley can explain to us that when you process those things, they get stronger. So you might, you know, your spaghetti sauce might taste really good, but after it's been processed in a canner, it might come out really like dragon breath with the garlic, you know? So I even cut a lot of that stuff out and I'll add it afterwards.
And I think that's key. That's the thing that I find too, is people think that they need to make these concoctions, and I've got to have all of these things in there so that it's going to taste great when I bring it out of the pantry and use it. And that's okay, but for me, I try and kind of simplify the things I can. Like I can beans by themselves. I can meat by itself without an extra flavoring in it, because I think it gives me a little more flexibility, and I can be a little more creative because I'm not tied down to the taco meat that I made, and it's taco meat. You can't change it after you've canned it because it tastes like taco meat. But if you've canned just ground beef or beef chunks, you have some flexibility to make whatever you want. And that's the great thing about canning, is if you keep it simple, you have a bazillion options to do whatever you want to do. And that's why I like to can, is it gives me options instead of being tied down to, whatever.
I love that too. I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'm going to let Heather and Liza ask you some stuff. But one of my questions was, if we find a great recipe that is a canning recipe that is safety tested and good for canning and approved by like the National Center for Home Food Preservation, or you find it in the ball book, like the new ball book, what if I wanted to, like, let's say I wanted to take one of those recipes and add like onions or more garlic to it? Do you think that's a good idea or not?
No. No.
Why
My
not?
answer is no. Because when you add a low-acid vegetable, let's say you're going to make barbecue sauce, and this barbecue sauce has a certain amount of garlic in there, and you love garlic, like you really love garlic, if you add extra garlic in that recipe that's been tested, you're changing that recipe. So whatever they've tested, it's not the same anymore, because you've changed the pH of what that product is. So if you are one of those people that wants extra onions and wants extra garlic in your product, put it in at the end. When you've canned it, you bring it home, or you bring it off your pantry shelf, throw it in a pan, put the extra stuff in it when you cook it up. Because first of all, it's going to taste better. You'll have a fresher taste. The garlic's going to be more garlicky if that's what you're going for. And you're safe because you follow the approved recipe.
Okay, so what if I wanted to add... Oh, okay, that's weird feedback, but that's okay. If I wanted to add garlic powder and onion powder, would that be okay?
Yes.
Okay.
You can add dry spices, garlic powder, onion powder, any dry herb that you'd like. Anything dry, yes, it's okay. You can do that. But be careful, because sometimes, like Heather said, they really get strong over time. Like, I never add sage to anything because sage goes really nasty when you can it up. So you just need to be really careful. Try some, but anything dry can go in. Dry is good.
Rosemary is a really big culprit. When Nick makes his spaghetti sauce, he likes to put dried rosemary in it. But this last time we made spaghetti sauce, I said, just a whisper. Otherwise, your spaghetti sauce tastes like a pine forest.
Right. Exactly.
Not good. Not good. Add it at the end. When you open it up, add a little rosemary in when you cook it, because when you simmer your home canned goods, you're going to need to cook them for a little while, just to make sure they're safe, and it's all good. Now, I'm going to yield the floor to Liza, because I know Liza came prepared, and Liza came with questions, so I'm going to let her ask. Liza is still in the research phase of learning how to can. She hasn't done, maybe she has done a little bit, like I think she's done pepper jelly, right?
Yes, I did the jalapeno jelly.
Okay.
The one
so,
thing.
That's easy enough, but there's a whole bunch I know you want to do. So go ahead, I'll shut up.
Okay, so here's a hot question. Okay, and this is the question that all beginning canners that are going up on YouTube are probably wanting to ask. Okay, when we first want to learn about canning, we go on YouTube and we see them do these fabulous meatloaves in the mason jars, with the eggs and the crackers. And then we go and we see a woman cut this hunk of meat and stuff it in the jar and do the roast and do soup with noodles. And then, you know, you hear them say, the USDA says this is not allowed, but I've been doing this for 30 years. Listen to me. And then you buy your books and you're all excited and you're like, yes, I want that meatloaf on my shelf. You open the book and the book says, no crackers, no eggs, no noodles. So as a beginning canner, it's confusing, and sometimes it's a little disappointing because you see all this razzmatazz, and then you open your book, you know, and then you don't have you don't have that recipe for that holiday meatloaf in the mason jar that you want to do. So how do you answer that to me as a beginning canner, you know, about those things?
Well, here's the thing. First of all, as a beginning canner, I would recommend you start water bath first, just because it kind of gets you going in there, gets you comfortable with following the recipes, kind of knowing what's going on. And when you get into pressure canning, you really can't can meatloaf. And there are tons of videos out there. I've seen them myself where they just make their meatloaf and plop it in the jar and they put it in, you know, they make up a time because there's not an approved recipe for meatloaf, so they're making up a time. I think the made up time for everything is 90 minutes and you're safe. But you can't can meatloaf because of a density issue. If you're shoving that jar full of hamburger with the dairy and the eggs and the cracker crumbs, it's really dense. And you know how meatloaf is anyway. It's dense. You've got to make sure that that meatloaf is 240 degrees in the center of that jar to make sure that it's safe and that it's safe for long storage so you don't get botulism or you don't make yourself sick. So it's the density issues with the ground meat, and we just don't do dairy, eggs, or crackers because it's just not something that's safe to can. And there will be people that will tell me until their dying day that they've been doing it, their grandma did it, my mom's done it, you know, whatever. And, you know, that's their reality, but that's not my reality. And I'm not going to argue with them because, you know, they've done their research or whatever. But for me, as a master food preserver and a safe canner, it's not safe to can dense hamburger, meatloaf. There's lots of low-acid foods people can that they probably shouldn't have canned, and that's one of them. Does that help?
Yes, it does. It does definitely help. And I did have one more good hot question that was supposed to be part of that question. Talking about high-acid foods now. When I first started to learn about, you know, canning and the whole concept, I went on YouTube, and again, I saw this lovely little gal. She had like 50 pounds of tomatoes. It was really exciting. And, you know, she cooks up the pot. She's stirring it up there. And then she boils these tomatoes. It looks beautiful. She puts it in the mason jar, and I'm thinking, okay, where's the canner? There ain't no canner. I guess it's called open kettle canning. And then, you know, she took this wand out with the pH measure and said, okay, it's in the acid family, slap it on, we're good to go, and she didn't process it. So as a beginning canner, that's confusing to me, too, because I'm looking for the canner, and there's no canner.
Well, as a beginning canner, you've already learned that you need to water bath things, so good for you. You picked that up where that's not a good process. That's called open kettle canning, like you said, and they used to turn them upside down, and then the jar will seal. Well, just because something's sealed doesn't make it safe. So you do need to water bath. You know, if the recipe says water bath it, water bath it. I have been guilty of inversion, I have to tell you. When I used to do jam, I would do it, flip it upside down. That's the way my mom taught me how to do it. That's one of those things I learned in that class that I was doing wrong. So all of those things, if it says water bath it, water bath it. Don't mess around, especially with things like tomatoes, salsa that have that tomatoes are kind of right on the line of being a high acid, low acid food. You don't want to mess around with that stuff. So water bath or pressure can, as the recipe tells you to do. You'll be safe that way.
So what I'm getting at is, as a beginner, is follow my book. That's
Absolutely.
What we do is follow our books.
Yep.
By the way, Noreen lost her power, so if you're wondering where she went, she's going to come back, but she lost some power. So that is a perfect question to ask you. What do you consider safe books? Because I'm a book lover. I mean, that's where I learned how to can by going to the library. And for months before I would even buy my canner, I did nothing but read. So what are some of your favorite books? So what should, I mean, I would assume every book out there probably isn't safe or uses tested recipes. So what would you recommend for newbies to buy to educate themselves and know that what they're reading is safe?
The books that I recommend, honestly, are So Easy to Preserve, which is a book that you can get from the National Center for Home Food Preservation from the University of Georgia. You actually have to mail them a check. They don't do online sales, but that is kind of what is considered the canning Bible, as is a ball book. Any ball book from 1989 to current would have the correct information. 1989 and older than that, not anymore, because the times and recommendations have changed. So ball book, So Easy to Preserve. Ball's come out with that really cool book this year. Great book.
Yeah.
Anything by Ball, National Center for Home Food Preservation, those are the two that I go to.
Those are your go-tos.
And I use extension publications too, from any extension service. Washington State University has a huge library of publications that you can get online for all types of food preservation, from canning, drying, they have some fermenting, they have all kinds of stuff. And they're very inexpensive, and they have the most current information.
Nice.
Liza said I missed alligator meat. What was the answer there? Do we just can it like meat or what? I mean, come on.
I don't have an answer for alligator meat. If it doesn't say we can can alligator meat, I'm saying there's no recommendation, no alligator meat. Freeze your alligator meat.
Well, yeah.
Oh, I know too. Have you ever canned fish? Not that I want to, but I see people asking me all the time, can fish? And I've seen like people in Alaska canning salmon, but you know what? I've seen them can it in the little 4-ounce jars, like the half jelly jars. So,
yeah.
And is that because it's super oily, or doesn't it matter? Is that just a personal preference?
No, you can. Well, I live in the Pacific Northwest, so we have people up here that can fish all the time. They can tuna. A lot of people can tuna here, and I'm telling you, if you've had home canned tuna ever in your life, you're never going to want to buy a store-bought can of tuna because it tastes so much better. But yes, there are certain recommendations for canning fish. You can't can fish in a big old quart jar. Although someone gave my husband a quart jar of tuna one time, and he was so proud, and he came home and he said, "Look what I got from work." And I looked at it and I said, "Please tell me that's not tuna." And he said, "Yeah, the guy gave me some tuna at work." And I said, "We're not eating that." I said, "No way." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, it's a quart jar. There's no recommendations for quart jars. It's not safe. There's density issues." And he looked at me like I was nuts. And I put it in the trash. But yes, you can can fish. It's a pretty easy process. You have to can it for a really long time. I think it's 110 minutes for those little half-pint and jars. Yeah, it's a long time. So, but it's delicious, and there are really great recommendations. And again, WSU has a couple of publications that are great for canning fish.
Awesome. Okay, well, I guess I missed tomatoes, alligator meat, and Liza was just talking about the cream cheese thing. So we'll just continue there like nothing ever happened, and maybe I can mash up these two things, and maybe we'll just pretend like this whole thing never happened. But you know what? Such is life, and we'll just roll with it. So I've done having my yelling attack because I really did. You know, my husband said, "Would you stop yelling?" I'm like, "Don't tell me to stop yelling." When they're not calm,
table talk. We can't have a table talk without Noreen. We're at the table.
I don't know. It might be
It was pretty funny, the conversation when you were gone, but.
Well, okay, Liza, keep going. I want to hear about the cream cheese because
Yes,
I have
the cream cheese.
issues with the whole cream cheese thing. So.
The cream cheese. When I first, one of the first canning videos I ever saw was someone canning cream cheese. There's many cream cheese videos. You know, and as a beginning canner, you see this, you know, beautiful white milky can of cream cheese, and you think, wow, you know, if something goes bad, I can can that cream cheese and eat it 20 years later. Why is it not a good idea to can the cream cheese?
We don't have any recommendations for canning anything dairy. Not milk, no cheese, no cream cheese, no butter. Basically because they're a low-acid food, and we just don't do them because there's no recommendations. And if you're canning something that's high in fat, the fat can, if there's any kind of a botulism spore in there, the fat kind of coats that spore. So even if you did can it, we're not sure that that heat gets and kills that botulism because that oil kind of insulates it. So we don't do butter or cheese or cream cheese. I've seen all kinds of things. My personal issue with it is gross. It changes the texture. You're not ever going to have cheese like the cheese that you can melt. It just crumbles. The oil comes kind of out of it. The quality of the product is totally a waste of your money, and cheese is not cheap. So if you're buying a really good cheese and you're stuffing it in a jar and you're canning it with, you know, whatever time you've decided, you're ruining your product. So for me, it's about being wasteful and the quality. I'm not going to eat that crummy cheese. Gross. And it's not safe.
I totally agree. I do. Yes. Liza, you have other questions?
Yes. And this kind of falls along the same line of the dairy. I've seen also people can the butter, and then I've also seen others say, you know, the butter is not safe to can. However, if I remove all these proteins and make it like ghee, I can go ahead and can this ghee, and it's safe rather than canning the butter. And how would you answer that as well? The same way?
Pretty much the same way, because it's fat. First of all, the instructions that you see online, I've seen it where people can it in the oven, where they put the butter in a sheet pan, the jars are in there, and they put a stick of butter in every one of the little holes of the jar, and then they just stick that lid on, and you got to shake it a bunch of times so that it kind of solidifies in the jar and it's nice and pretty. And then other times, and there's no canning of that. They just sit it, and it makes that vacuum seal. But remember, just because it's sealed doesn't make it safe. But there's other people that say, well, I'm just going to pressure can this butter, and I'm just going to kill everything in there, and it's going to be fine. But we don't know that. We don't have any kind of testing on butter. So we, as master food preservers, we don't recommend it because there's no testing, number one. It's expensive. Your quality's not going to be good. And if you really, really want some canned butter, if you need to have it for your food storage, or you're a prepper and you really want to have it, there's a product that you can buy that's commercially canned. It's called Red Feather Butter. It's really expensive. It tastes not bad if you have to have it at, you know, the zombie apocalypse or whatever. You have to have it. It's just not recommended because it's a low-acid food and it's a perfect environment for botulism to thrive. So we say no, don't do it.
Right. Red feather butter is really expensive. And personally, I think it tastes like margarine. It doesn't taste like butter. I think that it isn't. I don't like it. That's just my personal preference. They also make cheese in a can, which I also don't like. I don't really care for that either. But again, if you need to have, if you feel like you absolutely can't live without those things in your food storage or whatever in your pantry, then there are options. I know my friend Cat's Cradle, she cans butter, and I know a lot of people who do can butter. But I never have, and that's probably a road I'm not ever going to go down. That's just a personal preference. But, I just like with anything else, you just have to assess those risks. But I like the way that you have approached it, Shelley, is that as a master food preserver, you're not comfortable recommending that people do those things. And I also feel that when people ask me a question on my channel or they make a comment about something, I think that would be great to can, or can I can that? That's the big question. I swear I'm going to have t-shirts made. Can I can that? I've said right into it, I really have. And it's not that I'm disrespecting the question, because I'm not. I totally get it, because we live in a world of bigger, faster, cheaper, and every time you go to the grocery store, they're putting something else in a can, or in a jar, or in a box, or in a bag. So we feel like maybe we could do that at home, and not everything is the best idea. And when people ask me stuff, I always tell them, do as I say, not as I do. I'm still learning every day. We're all learning new things, and my go-to answer is, if you can find a safety-tested, recommended for canning recipe, then that's what you should use. You should not just use your grandmother's recipe for chicken soup and expect it to be safe. So,
correct, absolutely correct, and
that covers a lot of everything.
It does. It covers a ton of stuff. And for me, and I kind of touched on this already, and while you were gone, we kind of talked about this for a minute, about doing things separately so that you have the ability to make whatever you want with your simple meats and vegetables and beans, to have them separately so that when you want to make something like you see in the store, you have the ability to go, oh, I can go to my pantry and I can pull those things off my shelf and I have it there ready to go. And it's convenient and it's fast and it's good because you know exactly what's in the jar.
Exactly. That's why I love having home canned meats. That's probably my favorite thing to can, is meat. Amazing. Because when you can plain meat, you have so many options. So that's the best part to me. You have canned chicken, you have canned ground beef, you have canned beef, you have canned pork. What can't you make? There is not anything you can't make. So, Heather, you got questions?
I do. Okay. What do you do when you have, because I've had one jar of beans that the lid popped on for me, like after canning it many, many, many months prior. I treated that jar like it was a toxic bomb. I had Matt almost in a hazmat suit, bagging it up, triple bagging it. You know what I'm saying? I treated it like it was a hazardous bomb. And Matt was like, is this really all necessary for a jar of beans, Heather? And I was like, yes, it's like poison. Did I overreact? Or is that normal behavior with something? How should we treat a jar that might pop on our shelf? And trust me, people, you will know when it pops because you smell the funk. You're like, what is that? Something's gone wrong. And then you have to go through each one of your jars and touch them all and ping them all, and it's a pain. And then when you find it, it's just like it's like death, you know? It's like you're having a heart attack. So how should we treat a jar that pops like that? What's the proper protocol for that?
You did exactly what you should have done. Here's beans. It's a low acid food. You canned it a while ago. It popped. It smells gross. you just throw the whole thing away. Just chuck the whole jar, everything goes. Put it in a bag, you can tape it, and
So
you can
don't
just put on there.
attempt to pour the beans down the toilet or in the food.
Open it.
Okay.
Just throw it away. Now, you don't keep your rings on, right? I see behind you, good girl, you don't have your rings screwed on.
Yes, I take them off.
Because that's how you knew, too, is because the lid popped. If you would have had a ring on there, the possibility of you not knowing, because, you know, it kind of gets funky in there, and then that ring kind of seals it back down, you would not have known that it was bad. So, good job for not having the rings on. Woohoo! You get a star for that.
Good point for Heather.
There's a controversy, apparently, about rings on, rings off, but we recommend no rings just for that specific reason, because you had that jar pop, that lid pop. So throwing it in a bag, tying it up, putting on there do not eat, chucking it out, that's exactly the right way to do it.
Okay, good deal.
Can I just say for a minute, I just had a Karate Kid moment. Rings on, rings off.
Exactly.
That's a really good question, because I get that question a lot. Heather, do you keep your rings on or do you take them off? And I always take them off. I always wash my jars. That way you can really check that seal, too, to make sure that it's proper and all of that. Now, Shelly, what do you prefer? Because I'm just dying to know, just personally, do you like the one-time use lids or do you like the Tattlers?
I was going to ask that, too. Thank
Oh,
you.
were you?
I was.
Great minds think alike.
Okay, I have never used the Tattler lids. I've never used them. I think that if you want to use them, I would use them exactly the way they say on the package. Like, use the manufacturer's instructions, because there's no real recommendations about Tattler lids, because we don't know what the seal failure rate is, because the National Center has been doing a test on these lids. Well, the test isn't over yet because it hasn't been the right amount of time. Like, it hasn't been a year yet. Okay. So I think that eventually there will be an actual recommendation, but I would say that if you're going to use them, I would just use them the way that they tell you to, and check them a little more frequently than maybe normal, because we know those metal seals, we don't have to really worry about them because they stay sealed. There's not really any seal failures. But the Tattlers have been, they have a little different seal failure rate so far. So just check them quicker.
Okay.
But I don't use them, no.
Okay.
I'm a chicken.
Or a creature of habit. I'm a creature of habit too. It's hard for me to try something new. When something works for you, it's almost like, you know, adding some, you know, some bad juju to it, you know, because you've got a nice flow already, so don't mess with it.
I'll tell you what, Shelly, if you want to try them, I have a case of both sizes. I would be happy to send you a box if you want to give it a try. Because here I'm going to tell you that I have tried the Tattler lids. I use them for my homemade Rotel, and while they sealed just fine, and they were fine, I like the old-fashioned metal lids better. That's just my own personal preference. I like the metal lids better. I feel like I know what to look for if there's a problem. I don't know what to look for if there's a problem with the plastic lids. And not to say that the plastic lids are bad. You know what? I have on my jar wall a lot of my plastic. I have a lot of plastic lids on there because I like that rubber gasket that comes with them. Mm-hmm. But I know Heather, you tried the Tattlers and you loved them.
I'm in love with them. They're wonderful. The seal on them is thicker, yeah. So I almost feel like it's instead of having that plasticeel, it's an actual rubber seal, and it just, when I look at the jar, it just looks so sealed to me. Where, you know, on the metal ones, they're much thinner, and you've got the little rim that, you know, kind of curves over, and it's like, I don't know, it just looks more substantial to me, the Tattler. Plus, they're so pretty. I mean, they're pretty. And I'm kind of vain. down if you haven't noticed, people. I like my stuff to show like a showpiece. So I do like the
The other thing I don't like about them, though, is I don't want to have to touch the jar when it's hot. Touch the jar, seal the jar, because I'm kind of a klutz.
Yeah,
and
you do have to tighten down that ring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that if you want to use them, great. I think if I were to use them personally, I'd probably use them on low acid. I wouldn't use them on pressure can stuff, just that's my own personal preference, but I'd use them for peaches and pears and, you know, jam and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But
Sure.
People love them, and I think it's a you love them or you hate them kind of thing. So,
Yeah, I did have a lid question, a lid canning top question. The ball, as a beginning canner, this is the one thing that freaked me out, was the whole ball. Literally, I was freaked out about it. Literally, the whole ball controversy about the lids and the boiling and all of this. And then I ran out because I'm getting ready to can. I've got my canner. I've got all my books, So Easy to Preserve. I've got a whole stack. And I ran out and I bought the layman's sleeve of the wide and the regular. Because I was so, you know, as a beginner, you don't know, because I had all these ideas of I'm going to kill my family, I'm going to give them botulism, these ball canning lids are going to fail, you know, we're all going to die. So, you know, as a beginning canner, how do you address that with the lids? Because I know it was a big controversy. People say, well, nowadays they're telling us to simmer, and then you go on YouTube and there's like 100 videos on why everybody's tops are failing because of the new stuff, or that they replaced something, or, you know.
well, let's talk about those lids for a minute. Okay, so the controversy kind of was on YouTube because people kind of got themselves in an uproar about it. Basically what happened was they just changed the way the lids were made, and actually they had been changed for a couple of years, and then they just said, oh, by the way, so the people were really using those lids for a while. It used to be that you would put your lids in some warm water and keep them nice and warm, and then put them on your jar. And now they're saying that you don't need to do that anymore. You can just, you know, put them in some warm water. You don't want to simmer them or boil them, because what happens is if that plastisol gets too soft and you tighten your jar down, you may actually not have a good seal, because you've sort of squished that plastisol out of your when you're tightening it down. If you do it too tight, you're going to lose your seal there, because there's nothing for it to seal to, because you squeezed it all out. So using those lids just in warm water works fine, and I have done both, and I think I still have some of the old lids that you need to get a little warm, and I have had no problem with just a little warm water, and I had no problems. I had no issues with them. I don't know why people did, honestly, because I think they work just as well. I haven't had any issues at all.
Okay, and the last question that I had about the lids, the other thing that I saw, because I, you know, with all of the videos, the stuff as a beginner, because you don't understand what's going on. The other thing that I saw was that a lot of people were having a black ring around when they would steal their food and they take it out of the canner. It looked like it had a black ring where that seal was. I don't know if that was overcooking, or can that be overcooked? Can you actually burn that onto the mason jar, like some of the videos that I saw?
So you're saying that the actual sealing compound stuck to the jar?
It looked black.
Yes. I have no idea. I've never seen that, or I haven't actually never heard that. I've never had any issues at all, ever, with those kind of lids, ever. And that's all I use. So I've never heard it. I've never seen it. It may have happened, but I have no idea.
Okay.
Wow. Okay, I have a couple of questions. You and I touched on this yesterday, Shelley, when we were doing our little test run. Let's talk about, first of all, someone in the chat has asked, is it safe to stack your jars? So we'll address that first, but then
okay.
I want you to address sterilizing your jars also. So James has asked, if it's safe to stack your jars.
Okay, stack them in the canner, stack them after you're done.
That's a good question. I think he means for storage.
Okay, so stacking your jars, it's best if you're going to stack jars, because you know what, we all want to stack the jars because they fit nice in the cupboard and they look really cool. But the problem is if you're stacking your jar on top of a jar, you might compromise that seal of the one underneath, depending on, you know, what have you got in that jar. Is it heavy? So what we say is, if you're going to stack a jar, maybe you can keep them in the box that they came in. You can stack them, put all of your jars in a box, and then stack them on top in a box. There's got to be some kind of a layer in between so that you're not compromising the seal of the jar underneath. And as far as, what was the other question? I've totally lost my brain.
Sanitizing your jars.
Oh, sterilizing jars. This was the coolest thing. So it used to be you had to sterilize your jars, right? Okay, I'm going to make jam. I got to sterilize these jars, and I hate this step, and I still hate this step. If you are going to process your jars for 10 minutes or more, so if you're going to make jam or whatever, and you know it's going to be in the water bath canner and the pressure canner for more than 10 minutes, you don't have to sterilize your jars ahead of time. Wash them with soapy water, make sure they're nice and hot when you fill them, but you don't have to sterilize. That was such a great, woo! I don't have to do this step. So sterilizing. Woo!
It's a party!
Yep. I know, it's awesome, huh?
Well, that is a gift. You just gave us all a gift.
I don't sterilize my jars. I have never sterilized my jars.
I sterilize my jars. I sterilize my spoon, my scoops, my debubblers. I sterilize all of it.
I wash them. I don't sterilize them. I run them through the dishwasher, and then boom, done. That's it. I run them through the dishwasher. That's hot enough.
So that's my candy gift to everyone, is you do not have to sterilize as long as you're processing more than 10 minutes.
Okay. Well, that is, wow. I can die a happy woman now.
Lisa wants to know if she has to pre-cook her beans before she cans them, and I can answer that, but I'm going to let Shelly answer that question because I personally think pre-cooking your beans is a waste of time.
Okay, so you mean like dry beans?
Yeah.
Okay, so the recommendation for dry beans is, because there's two
Doing it wrong
schools of thought.
by the look on her face.
I'm just going to tell you right now, the Ben's Beans method of canning dry beans is not recommended. We want you to hydrate your beans before you put them in the canner.
No!
I know.
Don't tell me that. I love
Party's over.
in a dry state. When you pre-cook them, they get so mushy by the time you cook them again. Oh.
Well, rehydrating is what keeps them from popping the lid off your jar. Yeah, I know. I'm the Ben's Beans bad girl because everyone loves that. I have not tried them that way. I know tons of people that do them that way, but that's not the recommended method to make sure they're safe. And so rehydrate, follow that recipe. And have you tried it both ways, Heather? Have you done it both ways?
Yes, I have.
Guilty.
Yes, I have. And I just like when you dry can them, well, not dry can them, when you can them in a dried state, I should say, when you go to cook them again, since you're cooking them in the canner the first time, when you go to cook them again, like say in a chili or a soup or something like that, it tastes just like the perfect bean. But now when you cook them first, you pre-cook them, and then you can them, and then you cook them the third time in your chili or your soup, a lot of times there's really nothing, I have found, this is just my experience, I have found there's almost nothing left of that bean. It is just kind of turned to, you know, either a half a bean or a little mushy bean or, you know, so I have just preferred, I'm a bad girl like Noreen, and I prefer to can them. So, people, this is why you don't watch us on YouTube and follow what we do.
See, that's why YouTube is not the best resource.
That's right.
It's not your go-to source for information on how to can anything. Which really is a nice segue into the thing I wanted to address before we say goodbye. There are so many videos on YouTube of people canning, and I am not going to name names because it is not my intention to call out, publicly humiliate, or whatever you want to call it, anyone. Because frankly, anyone who is wanting to can and make something better for their family is trying to do something better in their life. So good on them, okay? However, YouTube is an open forum, and anybody with a camera and a computer can pretty much upload a video about anything. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is good information. It just means it is information. So when you look at YouTube, you should, in most cases, consider it to be for entertainment purposes only. I've seen a lot of horror stories. In fact, just last month, Liza shared a video link with me of someone who was canning cheddar cheese, and I shared it with Heather, and an entire string of conversation ensued on Heather's Facebook page that was really, it was somewhat
a huge can of worms.
Yes, it was.
It was really, really something. It really was, but it was very frightening because I looked at that because Liza sent me the video. She says, watch this. You will seriously be shocked. It really was someone who was trying to do better for their family.
Yeah.
But in the demonstration of this, I think, almost 20-minute, maybe longer video, it was horrifying. And by the time it was over, I felt really awful because I was certain she was going to kill someone. And that is not a joke.
Can I add something, Noreen? One of the problems with that video, too, was that from what was recommended to her to follow this process, she didn't have, like, jelly jars. So she decided to just use pint because that's what she had on hand. So my question to you is, when a recipe calls for, and people are asking even for, like, when you can substitute low sugar or low pectin, when it comes to substituting jars or sugar or anything like that, your recommendation is what?
Okay, if a recipe calls for a specific size of jar and it gives you a time for that jar, you must use the jar size recommended and the time recommended. Okay? Sugary things like jam. If it calls for a specific pectin, let's say you're making strawberry jam and you want to make low sugar strawberry jam, you need to use the pectin that's a low sugar product, because if you don't, it's not going to work. And in jam in particular, if you mess with the sugar and the lemon juice too much, you run the risk of it not actually gelling. So you need to be careful. If it specifically says we're going to make, low sugar jam, use the low sugar pectin. You can't swap out Pomona's pectin for a low sugar ball pectin. They're two different animals. They're not even really the same kind of pectin. So you've got to use the specific pectin called for in a recipe. That's with any recipe.
What about the differences between liquid pectin and powdered pectin? What's your recommendation for that?
You need to use what it calls for. I am not a fan of liquid pectin. Liquid pectin and I are not friends. For some reason, it does not work for me. Except
I share your pinky girlfriend. I do.
We're not friends, but I did make freezer jam with liquid pectin the other day, and my friend showed me, and I was like, oh my gosh, this worked. I was so excited because I made it with liquid pectin. But in general, if it calls for liquid pectin, use liquid pectin. You can't swap out pectin. You just can't do it. Well, I suppose you can, but your desired result is probably not going to be what you want. And then it's a waste of money because you've wasted it. So, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Your favorite type of pressure canner? What's your favorite? What do you recommend for a beginner?
A Presto, but I really, because I don't pressure can a ton, but I really do want to get an All-American because I think that it would probably be easier to use. And I don't have a gauge on mine. I have the weighted gauge because I don't have a gauge. The thing with a gauge too, a pressure canner, you need to get it checked every year at an extension office or something. The first thing you do if you're going to pressure can, get that gauge checked. If you have a weighted gauge, you don't have to worry about it because you've got the weight instead of the dial gauge. But I really want an All-American. Someday, I'm going to get one.
Awesome.
Yeah, see, that's the thing with the All-American is it has both the gauge and the weight. So no matter what happens, you're good. And like, you know when your weight is jiggling just right, you know you're good to go. Like I have to replace the gauge on mine because it only works if you whack it with a wooden spoon. So
Seriously?
Doreen has
That's
this
not
pressure
okay.
canner.
I know that's not okay, but my weight jiggles fine.
Well, you know,
So,
I bought an All-American because I went to Noreen as a newbie and said, what should I buy? And she said, look, if you were going to commit to this, go for the best. Go for the safest. And that was the All-American. So that's where I spent my money. I just went for the Gusto. And it's true. If you buy it and it's expensive, you will use it because you don't want something that costs a couple $100 sitting on a shelf collecting dust. So I say if you're a newbie, just go for it because, you know, the safest is the best.
And
That I have a pot stove, and I can't use an All-American on my glass stove because it's too heavy.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to get a burner to use it. But that's my goal, is to get one of those and start really doing some of those things that I need to do.
Well, and the thing with the All-American canner is this: I started and I had gone on your page, and I had showed you the picture of the burner that I bought, the Cadco, for the pressure canner. Unfortunately, I had to sell my Presto because in the urban area that I live in a very urbanized, cosmopolitan city, okay? When I called my county extension office and I said, okay, I'm going to pressure can, where do I take this gauge? They were like, what? And I said, pressure can, as in meat, jar, seal, where do I take the gauge? They were like, well, maybe if you talk to the northern part of the state, they might be able to help you. So I had to get rid of the Presto, and I'm going to get a smaller All-American canner because if you live in an urban area, they're not going to test your gauge. So the thing is, you're going to have to send it off, and then my understanding is in the mail it could uncalibrate itself, being jiggled around. So it's kind of a catch-22. So if you're in an urban area, even if you can't get that big one, because I can't get that big one, I'm going to get the 915, which is the smaller All-American, but I couldn't get that gauge tested. They thought I was an alien, basically. They're like, what are you talking about? Literally, what are you talking about?
It doesn't surprise me. There's not a lot of extension offices that have that option available. I mean, we do it at our extension office. We have gauge clinics around the county that I live in. We do them at like a feed store, and then we do them at the actual extension service office. But I understand that that's actually consideration. If you're getting a canner and you can't get a gauge tested, then you need to get a canner that doesn't have a gauge. For people that live at high altitude, the gauge is what you need because you can see that gauge, because you're going to have to adjust your altitude and you're going to have to adjust your times and your pressure, and that's why you need a gauge. If you live in Colorado, you need something that has a gauge and a weight, just so that you have the option to see that. So,
someone in the chat is asking if it's safe to if they could find out if their family barbecue sauce recipe is safe for canning? And I know what the answer is, but I'm going to let Shelly answer that question.
My answer is I don't know, because I don't know the recipe, and my recommendation is to go online to the National Center for Home Food Preservation. They have a couple of good recipes for barbecue sauce, and I know that that Ball canning book that just came out has a couple of recipes for barbecue sauce, and I bet you if you kind of check some of those links out on those pages, you're going to find something that's really close to what yours is, and I bet you can make it work by finding an actual approved recipe. I mean, these books are full of recipes, like this book. This one, you're going to find something in this book. If you don't have this book, this is the complete book of home preserving. This is the first one. This is the new one. This has tons of recipes in it. You can find something in this book, more than likely.
Yeah, that's my favorite one. I like the new one. It's really boutique-y and kitschy and really kind of, I said it yesterday too, it's very hipster. It's got a lot of very fancified boutique kind of recipes in it, and it's very cool. But I am an old-fashioned, tried and true kind of person. So I like those recipes where I can make 8 to 10 pints of something or whatever. I don't want to make 2 quarts of a dish. I want to make 20. But that's me. And when I don't have kids at home anymore, I probably don't want to make 20 quarts of something. I probably want to make I don't know, but that's true. It's you know, it's all personal preference. But that's the one thing, is that canning, it surpasses all of that. You can do it however you want to, as long as you have a recommended safety tested recipe. That's my mantra now. And we don't can in the dark anymore. I never did a video of canning beans, so I won't be doing a video of canning beans in the dark.
I have to put a warning on mine now. Just warn me. Don't
so sorry to burst your bean bubble, but
no, that's why we're here, though. You see, that's why it's important to be here and talk about these things. And it is almost 10 o'clock here where I live, and I know we were interrupted a little bit, but we've been, now it's been about an hour. We've been on for about an hour, and we've gotten a lot of great questions. What I'm going to hope to do is go through and, because the thing about it is this chat isn't going to save after we go off the air, but any comments that people make after this goes live again, then those will stay under the video. I'd love to harvest any questions that people still have that maybe we didn't address. We addressed an awful lot. This was a really great chat. Heather, Liza, anything else you think we need to cover before we go?
One last quickie question. I have one last quickie question.
Go for it.
All right. Steam canning. Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, steam canning. Let me get my paper, because I actually have paper about this. Steam canning has not, well, okay, steam canning wasn't recommended for a really long time. There are some new recommendations for steam canning. The first thing you do is when you get your steam canner, you throw out the instructions in the steam canner, because there's new instructions. The foods have to be a high acid food, so jam, jelly, fruit, that you need to use a tested recipe for your boiling water bath canner. You need to process those jars in a pure steam environment. So that canner has to be vented prior to the processing time until that full column of steam comes out of the top. And the thing that's different is, well, it's not different. The jars need to be heated before you put them in the canner. And you need to keep everything hot when you put them in there, but you need to put a thermometer. You have to keep track of the temperature inside that canner. And so there's just all these different rules now. And you can go online, and there will be new rules posted on the NCHFP. And your processing time has to be 45 minutes or less, because it runs out of water. It's going to boil all the water out. And you can't add the canner to add more water because that messes with your processing time. So steam canners are okay if you follow the recommendations that are given now from, I think it was the University of Wisconsin Extension that did the new rules. So go to their website, and I don't think I link to those, but I can on the WSU page. We don't, as WSU Extension, we don't really recommend it just because there's all these different hoops you have to jump through. Lots of people use them, but with these new rules, it makes it really kind of hard to make it done, to do it safely with the thermometer, and you've got to make sure everything's just right. But I know people have used them for a long time. I personally have never even seen or used one until this new thing came out. I knew what they were, but I'd never actually seen or used one. So I just water bath everything. Just easier for me.
Can you clear up too for us, because there's a lot of, I know Noreen's gotten it a lot, I've gotten it a lot, about the pressure cooker XL. Can you pressure can in a pressure cooker of an electric pressure cooker? Can you pressure can in it?
No, you cannot. No, it is not safe. No, you cannot. Although your manufacturer's little manual that comes with you will say, oh yes, we checked, USDA says it's okay, blah, blah, blah. It's not safe. It's not a true pressure canner. And there will be people that will tell you, I know of quite a few people, actually people that I took a class from that are kind of famous people will say, oh yeah, I do it all the time. And I think to myself, I'm not going to eat at your house. Because if you're canning meat in that, it's not, you have no way to gauge what the pressure is. It's just not safe because there's no guarantee that it's actually at the right amount of pressure to safely can your food. And in order for it to be a pressure canner, you've got to be able to hold 4 quarts upright with the lid. That is how you safely pressure can. And some of those will have you lay them down on their side. So no, do not use those for pressure canning.
I have my pressure canner that you could probably see right there behind.
I see it.
Because my pressure cooker, not my pressure canner. That's my pressure cooker because I made pulled pork and corn on the cob for dinner. But when I bought that, they said, "Oh yeah, you can can in this." So I did not buy it for that purpose. And I went, "No, I don't think so." Even when I bought it, because I just wanted it for a pressure cooker. But I get it, and I look at the owner's manual, and the one thing that I noticed, all the recipes that they provided in the little cookbooklet for canning were all high acid recipes. They were pickles and jam and little chow chow thing, right? So they were all high acid foods, things that you would normally do in a water bath canner. The thing that really bothered me though was the live demonstration that I saw them do on a different model, not this one. It was another one. There's another one on the market. It's called a Big Boss pressure cooker, and it's oval, and it is like 8 quarts. And I have seen them lay quart jars on their side and tell you, that it's safe to pressure can. And it's like, I'm coming, Esther, because, and I'm dating myself, if anybody who knows that's from Sanford and Son. But if you don't know it, look it up, because it's kind of funny. That was frightening to me. But, yeah, so Heather and I have had this conversation more than once on our feeds, on Facebook, on our pages, people going, can I can in my pressure cooker? No, you cannot.
And it's not their fault. They advertise for this. I mean, I watched one presentation on QVC. Presentation after presentation all day long saying you can pressure can in this. So people are confused because no, you can't. It's false advertising, and they really should legally not be able to do that.
They're not anymore. Most of the manufacturers have actually pulled those claims from their spiel.
Okay.
Yeah.
The problem is the damage has already been done, though, because everyone has seen the ad.
Right.
And
Yeah.
every day on Facebook, I'm a member of some of these Facebook canning groups. I see it every day. Someone says, "Can I do this? I just got whatever." Or the trend right now is, "Can I water bath my green beans?" No, you cannot. You cannot do that. Please, please don't water bath your green beans. Please don't water bath your green beans. I've seen that for the last 3 weeks, and I just go, "Oh gosh, please don't." Well, it only takes 4 hours. No, please don't do that. It's a good way to kill your family. Please don't water bath green beans.
Yeah. Someone in the chat, real quick before we leave. I know I've said that like 6 times already. She said a friend of hers gave her a quart of home canned pasta sauce, and it has a white spot on the bottom. I asked her if it's on the inside or the outside of the jar, just because that made sense to me. But I'm feeling like you probably need to throw it out.
Yeah.
If it's on the inside of the jar, that could be bad.
I would say throw it out. And I have learned, too, one of the things that I do, that I started doing, if I give something away to someone, I label it on there. This is what it is. This is how I canned it. I put the whole 9 yards on there so that they know that it's safe to eat. Because I get things that I don't eat because I don't know how they've been processed, and I don't really want to die. So
We all get things that we don't eat. We just say, "Oh, thank you! How sweet!" And then we
yeah, exactly.
we put it under the microscope, and we get out the little laser thing, and we see. I'm being facetious, but
Shelley, can you clear up the Mrs. Wages for everybody? Is that safe to use, the Mrs. Wages? Is that like approved, tested? Like if you're making Mrs. Wages salsa and Mrs. Wages, pickles. Because I myself have used Mrs. Wages pickle, canning pickled mix. Is that safe to use? Is that approved?
Well, here's something I learned about Mrs. Wages that I did not know. It's actually called Mrs. Wages. We've all been saying it incorrectly. Just so you know.
That doesn't even sound right, Shelley. Mrs. Wages.
Mrs. Wages. Hello, I'm Mrs. Wages.
No, Mrs. Wage just cannot be fancy like that. That's like Target instead of Target. That's just wrong.
I was like, it doesn't say what?
Watches.
Watches. Yes.
Oh, I don't know about that one.
You use them exactly as they say. Those are just fine. I've used them. I think they're fine. Sometimes people don't like them because they're really salty. I have heard that super salty pickles
are very salty. They are very salty.
Totally safe to use if you use them the way that it says on the package and you process them the way that it says on the package.
Okay.
In fact, why not cheat a little? Who cares? If it tastes good and your family likes it and you do it safely, they're fine.
Well, there you go. Now, Noreen, we're going to be laughing at that. And I'm going to say every time Mrs. Wages.
It's true. We are. It's a big deal.
Mrs. Wages.
Okay, and one last question, which I think is an important question to address, is will you talk a little bit about siphoning and what causes that? In a lot of people who maybe like to tip their jars when they take them out of the canner to get that little bit of water off the top. That's something I had to break myself of.
I did too. I do it too, and now I'm trying to break the habit because that's how I learned. That's the technique I use to remove my jars. So that's a good question.
I do the same thing. It's just an OCD thing to tip that water off there. Okay, siphoning happens. Like when I do peaches, mine always siphon. They just do. I don't know. It's just kind of the nature of the beast with some of those things with peaches and stuff. But what siphoning is where you lose some of the liquid out of your jar. So if you're like pressure canning something and you're losing liquid, my first question to you is, did you keep that pressure nice and constant so it's not doing the up and down, up and down, up and down? Oh my gosh, I've got to turn it up. Oh my gosh, I've got to turn it down. If your pressure's kind of fluctuating, that will cause siphoning. Or if you're helping the canner get cold, some people can't wait to, maybe it's really late and they want to be done, so they pull that weight off of there, and the pressure goes off. That's going to pull the the water or whatever out of the jar. And one thing about pressure canning I wanted to say too, when you put those jars in your pressure canner, you put that lid on there, you vented them for 10 minutes, vented it for 10 minutes, put your weight on there. Everything from start to your process time to the end is part of the process time. You can't make that any faster because it's all worked into what that process time is going to be, and it's going to keep your food safe by letting it go up to pressure, do your process time, come back down from pressure naturally. If you're helping it along, you could be making the product unsafe. So siphoning happens when the pressure is fluctuating, you've helped it. Sometimes it just, my water bath stuff siphons. If you're water bath canning and your time is up and you've had your lid on, take your lid off and let those, turn the fire off, let everything calm down for 5 minutes, then take your jars out. That should help with the siphoning as well.
Awesome.
Nice.
Okay, well, I talked to Shelly before we started, like 3 times ago, and I said that this was our July canning panel, and would she be willing to join us again next month around this same time to do another for our kitchen table talks and continue this conversation about home canning? And she said yes. So we're going to plan doing another table talk about home canning next month, and I think there's still, I think, a lot of questions we could address. I think there's a lot of issues we can address, and I think with the 3 of us gals and all of you in the chat, I think that we could come up with some great questions for Shelly, and yeah, I think that would be awesome. So I'll get with you and we'll set a date and we'll go from there. I would like to say thank you so much for joining us tonight. This has really been a distinct pleasure, and it's been a lot of fun. You really do kind of fit in with all of us. Yeah, so we're all crazy in our own special ways. Life's too short, I think. So, yes.
And thanks for everyone who just hung in there with us tonight as we were hit by Mother Nature and Google.
Hopefully next month we won't be having this many problems with the weather, of course, but I can't guarantee it. Who knows?
Well, and if there's some really burning questions and anybody just needs to know right now, have them click over to that Facebook page and ask them, and we'll start working on questions that way too.
Yeah, the link to the Facebook page is in the information box below the video, and you can head on over there and click like, and then you'll get approved to join, and you can just join the community over there. It's a lot of fun, and it's a really great go-to resource when you have a question and you really just can't find an answer to it anywhere else, because sometimes it is hard. You know, the whole don't can onions, do can onions, don't can onions, and then there's a recipe for onion jam in the new ball book, and it's like, oh.
I'm happy to see that, by the way, because we love onion jam here. I'm so glad that Ball has approved me.
Well, because when you did that onion jam, and then I came on your video and I went, you really shouldn't can onions. And that whole thing blew up into such a nasty thing. Oh, it was funny.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing that I want to say too is I am a safe canner. We promote safe canning. There are people out there that have chosen to do it their own way, and that's fully their right to do that. But if you ask me a question, I'm going to research it and I'm going to give you the current safest guidelines that we know of right now. If you don't want to know that, that's okay too, but I'm just telling you that's what we do, is we give out safe information. And that's what we kind of are hoping to promote. I mean, you could be a master food preserver in your own area if you have that program. There's quite a few programs in the United States, lots in California if you're in California. But we just promote safe canning, and we want people to be able to have safe, healthy food for their families, and that's what we do. So
awesome. Well, that's a good place to roll to kind of tie things up. Thank you, Shelly, for joining us. It's been really fun. And thank you, Heather and Liza, for being here with me, because you're my girls. And I love you. So, thank you everyone else. We've had at one point we had over 200 in the chat watching the video, watching the live feed, and hopefully next month you'll all return. I'll be sure and get all of the information out and post it everywhere so you'll know that it's coming up. I don't like to do it too far in advance because it gets lost in everyone's feed. So I usually do it the day before so that you can have a heads up. So.
Awesome.
Thank you, girls, and I hope you have a good rest of the evening. I have to go do my dinner dishes.
And congratulations on Table Talks. I think that's an excellent thing that you're doing. So I'm quite excited to watch everyone.
I'm excited. Shelly's going to be here next month for August, and for September, I have something really cool planned for September. I have a guy that I went to high school with who is a master sommelier. He owns a wine distribution company, and he's going to come on, and he is going to talk about wine for the novice, because I am a self-professed wine moron, and he's going to come and teach us all about wine, and I think that's going to be fun. And then I would love to have Diane come on and do a segment with us and talk about, because she's a blended family therapist, and I want her to come on and talk about what she does.
Yes.
And you know, there are a lot of things that I would like to reach out to a few people and see if they'll come on and join us, because I think this is fun. We're just sitting around the table, we're just chatting like we were all here together, having a cup of coffee or an iced tea or whatever together, a glass of lemonade or whatever. So I just think it's fun.
I do too. I love
we all learn something. I know I learned a few things.
This is the whole point of YouTube to me, is the connection and the family and the girlfriend chat, you know, and the guy chat, because the guys come join us too.
That's
so
true.
I think it's just a growing of our circle, you know. It's just
absolutely
a growing of our circle. I love it.
You bet. All right. Well, with that, I will say good night, and everyone have a great week, and I'll let you know when we're going to do our table talk again. And until next time, I'll see ya. I'm going to take some of these roasted onions that we used, and I'm going to take some of this beautiful green chili salsa and put it right there on top. Just like that. And that is how we make a beautiful green chili burger.